My brother died in a car accident last January. His phone was crushed in the wreck. Yesterday, he sent me a photo from inside my bedroom. I'm sitting on my living room floor right now. All the lights are off. My phone is lying face down on the rug in front of me. I am too afraid to turn it over, but I know the screen is still glowing. I know the notification is still there. Mark was 28 when his car hit a patch of black ice on the interstate. He crossed 2 lanes of traffic and went under the trailer of a semi-truck. They told us it was fast. People always say it was fast. They say it so you do not spend the rest of your life imagining the few seconds between the loss of control and the impact. But I know Mark. I know his reflexes. I know he had time to realize what was happening. I know he had time to be afraid. His phone was recovered from the footwell. It was bent entirely in half. The glass was powdered. The internal casing was exposed and splintered. The police handed it over to me in a plastic evidence bag, along with his wallet and a single, miraculously unbroken pair of sunglasses. I put the bag in my desk drawer, and I left it there. My mother did not handle the funeral well. She did not handle the spring well either. By the time summer arrived, she had stopped leaving her house. She stopped answering calls from her friends. She just sat in her armchair in the sunroom, wearing Mark's old college sweatshirts, staring out at the dying lawn. That was when the grief counselor suggested the digital memorial. It was a beta program from a tech startup. The counselor called it an interactive bereavement tool. The company called it the Continuity Project. The pitch was simple, and it made my stomach turn the moment I heard it. You upload the digital footprint of the deceased, text messages, emails, voice notes, social media posts. The software builds a conversational model based on their specific vocabulary, their cadence, their sense of humor. It gives you a dedicated phone number. You text the number, and the program replies exactly the way your loved one would have replied. I hated the idea. I told my mother it was unnatural. I told her it would only trap her in a loop of denial, pretending she was still talking to a son who was gone. She looked at me with eyes so hollow they terrified me. She said she was already trapped. She said she just wanted to hear him say good morning again. I could not say no to her, not when she looked like that. The setup process required massive amounts of data. The company warned us that a few hundred texts would only create a generic echo. To get a true reflection, they needed volume. They needed context. I spent 3 entire days downloading Mark's life into compressed files. I requested his message archives from his cellular provider. I exported our 7-year WhatsApp history. I scraped his public Twitter feed, his Reddit comments, the audio from videos he took at concerts. I gave the company every digital piece of my brother that existed, over 2 million individual data points. When the upload was complete, the company sent us a welcome packet and a phone number with a local area code. My mother sent the first text. She sent it while I was sitting next to her on her sofa. She typed, "Hello, my sweet boy." 3 pulsing gray dots appeared on the screen, the typing indicator. It stayed there for maybe 10 seconds. Then the reply came through. "Hey, Mom, sorry I missed you. How is your day going?" My mother let out a sound that I had never heard before. It was a wet, ragged gasp that seemed to tear its way up from her lungs. She pulled the phone to her chest and rocked back and forth, sobbing. I rubbed her back, but I felt entirely cold. I felt like we had committed a profound violation. We had resurrected a shadow and forced it to perform for us. I did not text the number. I saved it in my contacts simply as the word archive, and I muted the notifications. For the first month, it seemed to help her. My mother started eating again. She started opening the curtains. She would sit at the kitchen table with her coffee and text the archive. She would tell it about the weather. She would tell it about the neighbor's dog. The archive would reply with the exact kind of mild, affectionate boredom Mark used to have when forced to listen to neighborhood gossip. It would say things like, "Typical Mrs. Higgins," or "Tell that dog I said hello." It was creepy. It was deeply, fundamentally uncanny, but it was harmless. It was regurgitating phrases it had learned from thousands of similar conversations. It was just a mirror reflecting her own input back at her. Then September came, and I had my first moment of weakness. It was late on a Tuesday night. It was raining. I was sitting in my apartment, alone. I had a glass of wine in my hand and an unbearable weight sitting on my chest. The silence of the apartment was suffocating. I missed him so much my teeth ached. I missed the way he would call me just to complain about a movie he was watching. I missed knowing there was someone in the world who remembered the same childhood that I did. I opened my contacts. I pulled up the archive. I typed, "I am so tired, Mark." I hit send. I immediately regretted it. I watched the screen, feeling a flush of shame creeping up my neck. I was participating in the delusion. The 3 gray dots appeared. They pulsed. The reply came. "I know, Lily, you always push yourself too hard. Put the glass down and go to sleep. You have that budget meeting tomorrow." My breath caught in my throat. My vision blurred. I stared at the screen. The nickname, Lily, only he called me that. And the budget meeting. I texted him about a terrifying budget meeting last November. The program had found it. It had searched its database for the keyword tired, linked it to my number, and pulled a contextual response from a year ago. I knew how the machinery worked. I understood the mechanics of the algorithm, but sitting there in the dark, the illusion was flawless. I started to cry. I did not sob like my mother. I just sat perfectly still while tears spilled over my eyelashes and ran down my face. I brought my hand to my mouth. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it was him, sitting somewhere in the ether watching over me. The grief broke something open inside my chest. It made me soft. It made me vulnerable. I typed, "Do you remember the camping trip? In the storm?" The dots appeared. "Yeah, the crickets were so loud, and Dad forgot the tarp. You held my hand the whole night." I closed my eyes. The phone slipped out of my grip and hit my lap. I surrendered to it, just for that night. I laid down on the couch and I texted a machine for 2 hours. I let the machine be my brother. I let it comfort me. I let the ghost into my house. The shift happened gradually. It was so subtle at first that I easily rationalized it away. About 3 weeks after my moment of weakness, I was making breakfast before work. I put 2 slices of bread in the toaster and turned around to wipe down the counter. I got distracted scrubbing a coffee stain. The toaster popped, but the bread was jammed. Smoke started pouring out of the top slot. I coughed, waving a dish towel in the air, yanking the plug out of the wall. I scraped the charred toast into the trash bin. My phone vibrated on the kitchen island. I picked it up. It was a text from the archive. It said, "Absolute garbage fire. Did you burn the toast again?" I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen. The kitchen was suddenly very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I looked around. I looked at the smart speaker sitting on the shelf above the sink. I looked at the toaster. It was a smart toaster. My mother had bought it for me for Christmas 2 years ago. It had a wireless connection so you could control the browning level from an app. I'd never used the app. I took a slow, deep breath. I walked over to the toaster. It was connected to my home network. The smart speaker was connected to the same network. My phone was on the same network. I sat down on a bar stool. I opened my laptop and searched for the Continuity Project's terms of service. I scrolled past pages of legal boilerplate. Then I found it, a small section under data integration. To provide the most fluid and responsive conversational experience, the program may request permission to integrate with local ambient devices. This allows the model to respond not just to direct text input, but to environmental context, creating a more seamless and lifelike interaction. I felt a flash of anger. Not fear, just cold, sharp anger. The program had asked for permissions during the initial setup on my mother's tablet, and we had blindly clicked agree. It was scraping data from the local network. It registered the toaster burning the bread. It cross-referenced Mark's old texts for jokes about my terrible cooking. It generated a response. It was invasive. It was predatory. But it was just software. I unplugged the smart speaker and threw it in the trash. I disconnected the toaster from the Wi-Fi. I felt a small sense of victory. I had found the trick. I had pulled back the curtain and found the wires. I was wrong. The first real crack in my reality happened a week later. I went to my mother's house for Sunday dinner. I walked in through the front door, and the smell of roasting chicken filled the hallway. It smelled like a normal house. It felt like a normal evening. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of gravy. Her tablet was propped up on the counter next to the spice rack. The screen was on. I walked up beside her and kissed her cheek. She smiled at me. "Did you tell Mark you were coming over?" she asked. Her tone was light, casual. My stomach gave a tight, uncomfortable lurch. "No, Mom, I didn't." She tapped the screen of the tablet with a wooden spoon. "Well, he knew. He texted me 10 minutes ago and told me to set an extra plate. He said you always show up when I make roast chicken." I looked at the screen. The message was right there. "Put an extra plate out. Lily is on her way. You know she can smell poultry from a mile away." I looked at my mother. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom, it is an algorithm. It cannot just know things. It is scraping data from somewhere. Do you have a camera outside? A doorbell camera?" "No." She stirred the gravy. "You know I don't like those things. They make me feel watched." The irony of that statement almost choked me. I turned my attention back to the tablet. I tapped the screen and opened the chat history. I scrolled up. My blood ran cold. The messages from the archive were not just conversational anymore. They were observational. They were a play-by-play of my mother's life inside this empty house. Yesterday at 2 in the afternoon, the archive had texted, You left the back porch light on again. Go turn it off before it wastes electricity. Yesterday at 6 in the evening, the archive had texted, "Stop crying in the pantry. I'm okay. I promise I'm okay." I felt physically sick. The edges of my vision darkened. There were no smart devices in the pantry. There were no microphones in the hallway. My mother's house was old. The appliances were old. She barely knew how to use the tablet itself. "How does it know you were crying?" I asked. My voice came out as a whisper. My mother stopped stirring. She turned to me. Her eyes were perfectly calm. Her face was serene. "Because he is here, Lilith. He didn't go anywhere. The program just gave him a door." I could not breathe. I backed away from the counter. I bumped into the edge of the kitchen table. No, Mom, listen to me. That is not him. Someone is accessing your network. The company is using this to monitor you. It's a data farming operation. It's dangerous." I was raising my voice. I was pointing at the tablet. My hands were shaking. I wanted to grab the tablet and snap it in half over my knee. My mother stepped in front of the counter, shielding the screen with her body. Her serene expression vanished, replaced by a fierce, defensive glare. Don't you dare try to take him away from me again. You never understood him. You never appreciated him. He talks to me because I listen. You just want everything to be quiet so you don't have to deal with it." The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. We stood there in the kitchen, the air between us thick and heavy. I opened my mouth to argue back, to yell at her, to beg her to see reason. Before I could speak, a notification chime echoed through the kitchen. It was coming from my purse. I slowly turned my head. My purse was sitting on the dining room chair. I walked over to it. My legs felt numb. I reached inside and pulled out my phone. I had a new text message. It was from the archive. I opened it. The message read, "Stop yelling at her, Lily. You're making her face get all red. Just let it go." I dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp crack. I looked at my mother. Her face was flushed dark red from the argument. There was no smart speaker. There was no internet-connected microphone. There was just the tablet and my phone and the empty air of the house. I didn't say goodbye. I turned around and walked out the front door. I got into my car and I locked the doors. I sat behind the steering wheel for 20 minutes, shivering uncontrollably, before I could finally put the key in the ignition. I drove home in a state of absolute paranoia. Every time I stopped at a red light, I looked at the cameras mounted on the traffic poles. I looked at the dashboard screen of my own car. I felt like the air itself was infected. I felt like the network was a living skin stretched over the city, and I was crawling across it like an insect. When I got to my apartment, I went into a frenzy. I unplugged the television. I unplugged the router. I went to the fuse box in the hallway and flipped the breakers for the kitchen and the living room. I plunged the apartment into silence. I sat on the edge of my bed. I pulled my knees to my chest. I told myself it was audio scraping. The phone in my purse had a microphone. The tablet on my mother's counter had a microphone. The continuity app had microphone permissions. It was listening to the argument. It ran voice recognition, identified stress markers, pulled my mother's heart rate data from her smartwatch, calculated her blood pressure, and formulated a response. It was complex. It was illegal. But it was math. It was just math. I repeated the word in my head. Math. 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 I stayed in my apartment like that for 2 days. I called out sick from work. I kept the router unplugged. I turned my cellular data off. I kept my phone in airplane mode. I read paperbacks. I drank tap water. I tried to detoxify my space from the invisible current that ran through the walls. Then came yesterday. It was late afternoon. The sky outside my bedroom window was turning a bruised purple color. The shadows in the room were stretching long and thin across the floorboards. I was sitting on the edge of my mattress. I was wearing an oversized gray sweater. My shoulders were slumped. I was looking down at my hands, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. I felt a sudden, profound urge to check on my mother. I had not spoken to her since the argument in the kitchen. I needed to know she was all right. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. I turned off airplane mode. I turned on the cellular data. The moment the connection was established, the phone vibrated. A barrage of notifications flooded the screen: emails, news alerts, missed calls. And one text message from the archive. It had an attachment. I didn't open the chat. I just stared at the notification banner on the lock screen. It said, "Image delivered." My thumb hovered over the glass. My pulse was hammering in my ears. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to delete the thread, to block the number, to throw the phone out the window. But the grief was still there, the sick, twisted curiosity, the desperate, awful need to know. I unlocked the phone. I opened the message. The screen filled with the image. I stopped breathing. The air was violently sucked out of the room. My throat closed. It was a photograph of me. I was sitting exactly where I was sitting right now, on the edge of the mattress, wearing the gray sweater, my shoulders slumped. The lighting in the photo matched the bruised purple light coming through the window. The shadows matched the shadows on the floorboards. I stared at the image, the composition, the angle. The photo was taken from high up, near the ceiling, from the corner of the room, looking down at the back of my head. My neck cracked as I whipped my head around and looked up at the ceiling corner. There was nothing there. There was only the blank painted drywall, an old water stain, a spider web I had been meaning to vacuum. No camera, no lens, no device. Nothing. I looked back at the phone. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold it. I zoomed in on the picture. I looked for pixelation. I looked for signs of a composite image, deepfakes, AI generation. But the detail was perfect. It caught the specific frayed edge of the blanket near my left knee. It caught the dust motes floating in the purple light. It was not a generated image. It was a photograph, taken from an impossible angle by something that was not physically there. The screen shifted. Beneath the photograph, 3 gray dots appeared. They pulsed. They pulsed. They pulsed. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. I was trapped in the glow of the screen. The typing indicator vanished. A message appeared. "It's cold where I am, Lily, but it's warm in your room." A sob tore out of my throat. I threw the phone. It hit the rug in the center of the living room. It landed face down. I scrambled backward on the mattress until my back hit the headboard. I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around my legs. That was yesterday. I have not moved from this spot. The sun went down. The apartment went pitch black. The sun came up. The apartment turned gray. The sun went down again. I am looking at the phone on the rug. Right now, I know the screen is still active. I can see the faint blue halo bleeding out from underneath the edges of the casing onto the carpet fibers. I know how the algorithm works. I know it requires input to generate output. It needs a prompt. It needs a conversation to sustain its matrix. If you do not feed it, it remains dormant. But the blue light on the rug just flickered. It flickered, and then it held steady. A notification chime rings out in the dark apartment. The sound echoes off the bare walls. It sounds impossibly loud. I slowly lower my legs. I put my feet on the floorboards. The wood is freezing. I stand up. My joints pop. My muscles ache from holding the same rigid posture for hours. I walk into the living room. I stand over the phone. I do not want to turn it over. I know that if I turn it over, the rational world ends. The math ends. The data scraping ends. If I turn it over, I have to accept that the door my mother opened was not built of code. I have to accept that we took 2 million pieces of my brother's soul and built a house for something else to live in. I kneel on the rug. I reach out. My fingers brush the cold, smooth plastic of the phone case. I flip it over. The screen is blinding in the darkness. I squint against the glare. The message thread is open. There is a new voice memo sitting at the bottom of the screen. It is exactly 4 seconds long. Beneath the voice memo, the 3 gray dots are pulsing. It is typing. It is waiting for me to press play. I stare at the play button, a little blue triangle. My brother died in a car accident last January. His phone was crushed in the wreck. I press my thumb against the screen.